Hi everyone, this is Mateo with Arcade. If you're watching this, you probably know that MCP Auth is kind of broken and many weird solutions are popping up all over the place. I wanted to ask Wils about this. He's one of our Auth experts here at Arcade. So hi Wils.
Hey Mateo, good to join you today. Yeah, as you said, like auth and MCP is very evolving. I don't know that I'd say broken necessarily, but it's definitely in progress. And yeah, we're really excited at Arcade also to be contributing to it. I've been in the auth space myself for over 10 years, so um, I like to think of myself maybe as an expert there, but definitely a large space, lots to learn, and excited to dig in today.
Absolutely. So I myself, I am not a security expert or an auth expert. So I wanted to know why this is such a big deal. Why do MCP servers and client need all of this complexity and complication?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex topic, auth in general, and then bringing MCP into it, which is an evolving standard, as we just talked about. Um, definitely paving the way for a complex situation for developers. And I think one of the things um, that MCP is focused on, that Arcade is focused on, is to make it really easy for developers not to have to worry about auth. Um, and I think the industry in general is on board with that too. So that's kind of the good sign, or like a good part of it. But as you said, it's a complicated area, and let's dive in to why that is. So the first thing to know maybe about MCP auth is that there's sort of two main types of auth when we talk about MCP. And just to kind of disambiguate right off the bat for folks, there's the auth between the client, the MCP client, and the MCP server, which are the two parties that are important in the MCP protocol. And then separately, very important that this is separate, there's the auth that the MCP server might need to do to call like downstream systems or tools. This is commonly called in the community tool authentication or stuff like that, but it doesn't need to be related to tools necessarily. It could be resources or other things MCP servers can act on. But the big thing here is that that server is accessing, for example, a Google or a Dropbox or a GitHub API, and that server then needs to authenticate against that API. The client is sort of not involved in it, for that second kind of step. And it's very tempting to say, oh, let's just use the credentials that the client has or that the user has on the client to go all the way and pipe it through and talk to that thing. There's a lot of very subtle security vulnerabilities and traps that occur when you do that. So it's very important that those two stay separate. If you're curious about some of those traps, we have another video at Arcade that was a kind of a roundtable discussion that I would refer people to. Maybe we can put the link down below or something. Um, but but yeah, those two kind of aspects of auth are kind of what we want to talk about to frame the conversation, and we can dive into each or both of those if you want to get deeper.
Cool. Thank you for clarifying that. So I guess my question now is what's missing today from for this to be a reality, right? So are we just waiting for each server and client to implement this aspect of the specification, or is the specification still evolving in this kind of authentication in this aspect, right?
Yeah. So another great question. So the specification is definitely still evolving. There's still pieces to add here. I would say, as of now, I think, yeah, as of now, the specification has in place the basics for authenticating between the client and the server. That's like that first kind of component that I was talking about. So that is in the specification today. People can start to implement that. That's sort of what we're waiting for right now. And then the second piece, the downstream tool authentication, authenticating to a third-party API from the server, that's a piece that the specification needs a bit more affordance for. It needs a way to enable that to happen. And that's something that Nate Barbatini, who is also at Arcade, and I have been pushing a PR. We have a PR open. It's number 475. If anybody's curious, on the Model Context Protocol GitHub. The way that we're pushing for it is actually not really auth related. As I talked about, it's for the server side only. It's not really, the client's not really involved. And sort of as a result, it doesn't need to be this like part of the protocol necessarily in sort of a capital P sense of the word protocol. There's not much that the client needs to do for the auth piece in that downstream auth, like second component situation I'm talking about. And all it really needs to do is enable the user to have a direct interaction with the server, or it put it the other way, the server needs to have a direct interaction with the user, which is often available from the client, but not always. And so there's sort of a check that we need in the protocol to have the server able to know if the client can inform the user or can get a direct interaction. And I won't get too much into the weeds of the proposal, but basically what it is a user interaction type of thing. We're planning to extend it on top of another recently merged in feature capability called elicitation. So this basically will allow the server side to say, hey, I need to interact with the user. And that might be for auth. It also might be for something like payments or a subscription upgrade or any other type of thing that the server needs to interact with the user for in a way that the client shouldn't know about or doesn't need to know about, or would be complicated to render in sort of a non-browser or non-direct kind of way. So again, I'll bring it back to the auth conversation because that's why we're here. But just keep in mind, like, we're trying to leverage these capabilities and introduce these capabilities that may be useful outside of auth in MCP, and that's kind of speaks to the youth that MCP has. It's very young protocol, and so we're trying to push that forwards and introduce capabilities that are useful beyond auth as well. But certainly that will be a step forward there. There's lots of other aspects too that are sort of needed in the auth ecosystem as well. There's another great proposal out from Aaron Parecki, who's at Okta and a OAuth and OpenID Connect kind of expert there. And he's really thinking about how do enterprises handle this, and you have an SSO system that you need to log in with that SSO system to the MCP client, and then that SSO should flow through to the MCP servers, and then eventually that should also flow through to all the downstream tool auth and things like that. So there's lots of other pieces that are evolving and will come into play. But I think we're very close. We're definitely there right now for the client server. People can start implementing that today and get a useful outcome. And then we're very close to that kind of downstream tool auth being kind of a recognized pattern in MCP as well. And then from there, we have sort of the foundation that we can build off of, I think, to get some really great experiences and even more secure experiences too.
That's awesome. I'll make sure to link that PR down below. And I have another question, which is more general, I guess. So I'm pretty sure you spend more time thinking about the MCP protocol and the ramifications of any change than 99% of agent builders. What would you like to see adopted by the spec, or like in terms of both and in general?
Sure. I mentioned like the spec is young, so there's lots of capabilities that I think will be useful. I mentioned for like payments or things like that. And auth can leverage those capabilities if they're there, or we can leverage those capabilities for auth purposes or security purposes if they're there too. So things like that I would love to see. Selfishly, the PR that Nate and myself have worked on, I think I would love to see that get merged and iterate with the community on it. Would also love to see, as I mentioned before, Aaron Parecki's push on the enterprise flow get adopted into the spec. There's also, so that will be really helpful for that first component of client to server authentication. there's also another piece that's sort of outside the MCP spec that if we can get that stuff that Aaron's proposing, which is, for those curious, it's called the Identity Assertion Grant. It's currently a draft RFC with the IETF. And if we can get that adopted for these third-party providers like GitHub, Google, etc., then our tool auth, that downstream auth, becomes really nice from a security perspective and a user experience perspective. In the enterprise specifically, it becomes much more secure, much more simple from a user experience perspective, and it becomes better for a developer experience as well. It is something that everybody needs to implement, but like, so it's work. So we're hoping it gets there. I'm hoping it gets there. But like I said, the pieces that we're trying to get in now, the user interaction bit, that will, I think, give us a really solid foundation to kind of go from and meet the industry where it is right now. I think the other big piece that's, again, sort of like part of MCP, but in general too, a lot of security concerns and considerations that are in the spec right now and being talked about and discussed in the community are around, what if the user connects to an MCP server that's malicious? Or what if the client that connects to an MCP server, the MCP server is good, but the client that connects to it is malicious? And like, how do we handle that? And there's sort of right now like it's kind of like going to a website on your browser that's going to download malware, or it's sort of like downloading malware onto your computer. And it's sort of like, if you connect to that server right now, there's like not a whole lot that like guarantees trust or security. You can say like, oh, we'll put like HTTPS, we'll put TLS, we'll do mutual TLS, we'll do like all these cryptographic things. But at the end of the day, like, an attacker can do that too, and a malicious server can do that too. And so unless you have this sort of trusted boundary or trusted registry, is kind of where the industry term has evolved to, we're not really going to make it all that far. And like within an enterprise, you can say only the clients can only connect to MCP servers that are within my network or things like that. But we're in 2025. We live in a world of zero trust. Network boundaries only go so far. So really, I think the goal that I would love to see evolve is sort of an registry for MCP. And folks like Amazon, Microsoft have like announced that they're going to do this, which is great. I'm sure there will be a bunch of startups that do it as well. But it really affords the opportunity for like a sort of an app store for MCP. And like, then people can know like, oh, okay, Eve's server is good and it's registered and it's great. And, attacker's server is not in the registry and it's not good. So I think that'll provide a lot of trust for folks, and again, solve sort of this like base elephant in the room problem of like, what if the server is just bad, it steals my data, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. That was actually very close to my next question, and the only missing bit is, okay, so as an agent builder, kind of you answered already, okay, I should look for like trusted MCP servers that are maybe reviewed and approved by someone else. They are in a registry. But if I'm a MCP server developer, I want to sell access to my MCP server. How do I approach this? How do I make my server become trusted?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that you're kind of like getting at like, where is the industry today also, and like if I'm wanting to build and release like right now, like what can I do? And as I mentioned, like the client to server auth piece is in the spec today. People should be building to that today. The tool auth piece is on its way soon. So there's some tweaks I think that we're making to the PR to form it towards that elicitation model that I mentioned. So, but we're very, very close and working with Anthropic closely on that as well. And the thing I would say, and again, like these registries like sort of exist, kind of exist. There's like a GitHub README file that has a bunch of them listed, but that, so there's like sort of, it's kind of the Wild West right now. And so if you're trying to release an MCP server today, or use MCP in an agent or an application today, definitely the client and server auth. Beyond that, again, a little bit of Wild West. So you're sort of on your own right now to implement good security practices, things like that. If you can wait a little bit, would recommend it, a few weeks or something. But for now, it's a bit, you're kind of on your own. So you need to like very, very much consider all these different security considerations. Make sure that you're not leaking credentials, sharing credentials improperly, etc. Of the users you're working with. And honestly, like right now, and like self promotion here, I would use Arcade today if you wanted to have a do what MCP does. I think MCP gets a lot of hype, deservedly so. It's a very interesting protocol that's going to enable the industry to do a lot of cool things. If you're using it though in order to have and expose tools to a language model, um, you can build that today with Arcade. And Arcade is compatible with MCP as well. So we can get into what that means in a second, maybe. But the tools that you can build with Arcade, and the agents you can build with Arcade do have a strong auth component in a way that kind of removes the complexity for you. And if you really wanted to release today without MCP, is kind of the way I go. Go with Arcade, go with something like Arcade to do that. If you can wait a month or so, whatever it's going to be, a few weeks, then I would say MCP will have the things you need, and Arcade again will support that version of MCP as well as it develops. So
Right. So you touched in another thing that I wanted to ask, which is like, I today myself I build some agents and I use Arcade, of course, but I often get people asking, okay, so if I build with Arcade today, I know I can release and start like getting users and stuff, but if I wanted to move to MCP tomorrow, do I need to rewrite everything? What do I need to do to, I guess, move to a full MCP implementation?
yeah, that's a great question. So one of the ways that lately I've been kind of hearing and thinking about this is the tools that you want to use or have in an ecosystem like Arcade, or maybe you're building your own tools, maybe. These tools do sort of deterministic things. They call the Google API to list your email, or list your draft emails and send a particular one that you referred to by subject or something like that. There's a very like particular deterministic order that we're all very familiar with from decades of computer programming. And then there's what the LLM does, which is very non-deterministic, right? So Arcade is sort of the glue between those two things and how those can interact. So we have this like non-deterministic LLM, we have these deterministic tools, we need to connect them together. MCP does that as well, which is great. And so there's lots of ways that you can do this. That MCP is not the only protocol out there that does this either. And one of the goals of Arcade is to be able to do that in a sort of protocol agnostic way. Of course, we're going to lean into MCP. We're going to like put this effort in to try to make MCP better. We'll do that as well for any other protocols that kind of gain traction as we go forward as well. And yeah, one of the goals of Arcade here is like we don't want you ever to feel like locked in to a particular protocol or even like a vendor like us necessarily. Arcade will speak MCP to that like non-deterministic side, which might be your agent or it might be the LLM or whatever it is. And we can also speak MCP out the other way to your tools or other MCP servers that you want to connect to Arcade. Arcade really is like that middleware that can do that gluing and that transformation and that logic to connect those things together. So short answer, no, you will not be locked into Arcade. You will not even be locked into MCP. You will not be locked into Arcade's protocols or SDKs or APIs, etc. You can kind of rip and replace as you see fit if that's how you want to do it.
Awesome. My last question is, if you had a magic wand today and you could just like make any agent be real, what would that agent be?
Yeah. Let's see. So as an engineer, I spend a lot of time writing code, and I wish I had an agent that um, could help me like keep my team and my like task tracking, whether you use like Linear or ClickUp or Jira or whatever, GitHub issues. Um, the I wish I had a tool or an agent that could kind of keep those things up to date as I was working. That could kind of monitor like what I was building, understand which ticket I'm working on at any particular time, go add some comment at the end of the day or whatever that's like, hey, here's my progress today. Um, Whatever. I wish I could have something like that, and I think maybe the next hackathon we host, I might try to build that. We'll see.
Sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Wils. I'm sure we'll get some more questions at some point. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mateo.